One day, a young raven was out surveying a territory he thought he might like to claim for his own future family. So far, he had not seen any sign of any other ravens, and other than a peregrine falcon, there didn't seem to be any competition he need worry about. There was, however, one structure at the far end he was curious to see who occupied it. Through the many skylights on the roof, Raven could see numerous covered ones in white coats doing various activities throughout the day. In the center of it all was a huge multi-chambered box, and in the box was one white rat. In time, Raven noticed that there was a pattern of 5 days the whitecoats were there, and then 2 days when the rat was alone. Raven decided he would try to visit the rat on one of those quiet days. Early one morning, Raven descended down towards the lone building and noticed some of the skylights were propped open. He perched on the edge of one right above the box and watched as the rat scurried about unaware of Raven's presence. Raven watched for a while and then said, "Hello!" Was the sound Rat made, as if unsure he'd heard anything at all. "I said hello," Raven repeated a little louder.
"Oh, hello,"
Rat said quickly, looking all about, but still not seeing Raven. "What are you doing?" asked Raven. Rat then stopped and looked up at Raven.
"What do you mean, what am I doing?"
Rat asked sharply.
"Can't you see? This is a lab, and I'm involved in a very important study."
"Really?" asked Raven. "It looks like you're trapped in a box."
"What?
Snapped Rat.
Trapped in a box? No. I'm in a maze. Day in and day out, I'm demonstrating my intelligence. Those in the white coats talk about how my species has evolved from a shrew, and how I have evolved great intelligence. Why, I can figure out my way through this maze over and over again, even though the pathway gets changed as soon as I figure it out."
"If you're so intelligent, why would you say your species evolved from a shrew?" asked Raven politely.
"Don't you know anything, you stupid bird?"
asked the rat, rather put out.
"I get to hear the whitecoats talk about the formation of the Earth billions of years ago, and how many life forms may have began, and how it may have evolved through a long, slow, step-by-step process whereby my ancestor was a shrew. And over time, and numerous mutations, my species came to be more intelligent and more resourceful than our predecessors. We are very intelligent. I prove it all the time. This is what I do in this lab, Raven."
Interesting. Care to tell me more?" asked Raven.
"Very well."
Rat said in a somewhat bothered and tiresome voice, and then he proceeded to explain all he had heard the whitecoats discuss about the evolution of all living things. Raven settled in and listened intently. Many hours and most of the day had passed when Rat finally finished. Raven then asked, "Well, Rat, where was the flood in all of this?" Rat, looking rather perplexed, asked,
"Flood? What flood? There are many floods in Earth's long history."
"Why, the flood that covered the whole world. There was only one of those," Raven said.
"Oh, you're teasing me, right? The whitecoats call it a myth. They joke about others like them who are silly enough to believe such a ridiculous story."
said Rat, laughing. "The whitecoats think the worldwide flood is a ridiculous story?" asked the Raven, rather puzzled.
"Oh, yes. They say it's a children's story told by fools.
Laughed Rat.
And they get really mad sometimes because some use that stupid story to try to interfere with the important work that goes on here."
Raven sighed and looked Rat in the eye and said, "Rat, the whole history of me and my kind is based on that flood. I think there are many different cultures and tribes of those we call covered ones that have kept an account of the same history as well, although of course it's told from their perspective." Rat laughed even louder.
"Surely you jest, Raven."
"No, I'm very serious," said Raven rather sorrowfully. "The ravens have been very careful to have kept the account of our history intact."
"Your history?"
snapped Rat.
"I've heard the whitecoats say you ravens came from dim-witted dinosaurs, whatever they may be. They tell us how the dinosaur scales became feathers, and then learned to fly. And that is where all the bird kinds came to be."
"Well, doesn't that sound a bit far-fetched?" asked Raven, not wanting to wait for an answer, so continued. "Our history tells us ravens were always ravens. But alas, Rat, I've listened to your story for all of the day, and the sun will be setting soon, and I must be off. I will return tomorrow, and we can continue our conversation. Since you will be up most of the night, see if you can figure out how to get up out of your box and onto the rooftop, and we can talk face to face."
Oh, yes.
said Rat rather proudly.
I am very intelligent and have evolved to be able to figure out puzzles such as this. Tomorrow we will sit together and talk up on the roof.
And off Raven flew to roost for the night. Raven had a very peaceful rest and dreamt of the glorious stories of his ancestors. He was very excited to be able to share them with Rat. Rat spent the night figuring out how he was going to get up onto the roof. The next day, Raven got up at first light and went to some of his favorite hunting grounds. He ate, and then he gathered in his crop some of his favorite tidbits to share with Rat. Upon arriving at the lab, as Rat called it, he noticed Rat was already on the roof. "Hello, Rat," Raven said.
Oh, good morning, Raven.
Rat said. Just then a rustling sound was heard in a tree not far off. Both Rat and Raven turned with a start, but neither saw or heard anything else. Raven said softly, "Keep an eye and stay close, 'cause there's a falcon who likes to hide in that tree. He's quick and cunning and very competent hunter who loves to surprise any not watching their back."
Not to worry. I am quick and cunning myself, and way too intelligent to allow myself to be taken by some stupid bird. By the way, why do you talk so funny this morning?
Asked Rat. Raven wondered if Rat was perhaps a little overconfident about himself as he placed the treasures from his crop onto the roof. "I brought you some of my favorite treats," Raven said excitedly.
Treats? What kind of treats?
Rat asked. "The best kind, the eating kind, of course," said Raven.
I can't eat any of that.
Rat said, not being very polite.
I'm on a special diet, a diet made to improve my intelligence even more.
"Oh, all right, Rat. Well, are you ready to hear my story? The story of history, as told by the Raven since the beginning of time? I am very excited to share it," Raven said gleefully.
I suppose.
Rat said rather mournfully.
But I don't know what good it'll do. I already know the flood is just a mythical fantasy. The Waitcoats call it nonsensical gibberish.
"Gibberish?" laughed Raven. "It's the history of my kind, passed down through all of our generations. It has been kept by my kind to preserve our respect for the one who created us, for each other, and for those different from ourselves. Throughout all time, my kind was given great honor and responsibility. Come, listen, then you decide for yourself." And Rat rolled his eyes and sat as if he were doing it against his will. Raven began. "On the day we were made, the earth was new, and we took to the sky and saw the grasses and trees were brilliant greens of many hues, and there were beautiful plants and flowers of all sorts that covered the entire land. As the first ones flew far and wide, they could see the lakes and oceans were teeming with life of an almost unimaginable variety, as numerous kinds frolicked and played all over the different bodies of water. The very next day they watched as all the crawling and four-legged animals of many shapes and sizes came into being. Some were far bigger than anything alive today, and we even shared the skies with creatures with wingspans wider than this thing you call a lab. Many of these new animals had hair, including your kind, Rat,"
Preposterous.
cried Rat.
My kind developed great intelligence over eons of time. As I told you yesterday, my kind evolved from a shrew.
"May I continue?" asked Raven softly. Rat scoffed.
I suppose so.
Raven continued. "Anyway, on that same day, 2 of the menkind, the ancestors of the Whitecoats, were made also, and they were loving and kind to all things living. They spent much time watching, playing, and caring for all the different kinds of creatures the earth was so full of. And for a long time, everything under the sun, moon, and stars was at peace with each other, and there was a feeling of wonder and tranquility all throughout the entire earth. All the living creatures had plenty to eat, for there were fruits and nuts and seeds in abundance, and nothing hunted something else, and nothing killed another for food. It was a most perfect place."
Right.
Rat chuckled. But then one day it all changed. 2 of the menkind began wearing skins of animals that had been killed, and we gave them a new name, the Covered Ones, for they alone wore something that was not theirs. Snakes became strangely defensive, and although the earth was still beautiful, no one was allowed into the special garden anymore. In a short time, certain plants and trees developed prickly parts and thorns, and foraging for food became more difficult. All the creatures of the earth began to mistrust each other, and many of them began to keep to themselves and have nothing to do with others not like themselves. As the Covered Ones began to multiply, they became hateful and selfish, and violence and death spread throughout the land. Then a great box was built, and members of every kind that breathed air were taken aboard, and it rained for a long time. When the rain finally stopped, and it had been sunny for a time, one of my ancestors was the first to be freed, and it is told that he flew for a long distance and was greatly grieved by what he saw, for all the earth was greatly changed. The air was even different, and flying itself became more work. All the large ones were lost, and nothing has ever grown to such great size since. Everywhere my ancestor flew, he saw it was desolate, and there was a foreboding emptiness throughout all the land. He wept and would not return to the others, but instead waited patiently for his mate to be released. From that point on, we ravens mistrusted everything and everyone, and all things became both our enemy and our food. Rat jumped with a start and ran from the raven screaming.
So you mean to eat me? You tricked me to come up under this roof and then torture me with your ridiculous story, hoping to bore me to sleep, and then make a meal of me? Oh, you are a vile creature. But I'm on to you now, you stupid raven.
Oh, calm down, Rat, Raven said softly. As you saw, I already ate, and you, Rat, have an unpleasant scent about you, one I have not noticed before. Perhaps it's what the white coats feed you.
The white coats feed me a special diet to make me stronger and even more intelligent,
shouted Rat. Yes, so you said. But understand this, Rat. Although I too am mistrusting of all other creatures, there's a longing in me for it not to be so. In my youth, I wanted to be friends with all kinds, including the covered ones. But growing up, I was taught by my parents that death and killing is the way of the world, and that is how we survive. But my kind also tells of a day when the world will return to how it was when it was young, that something happened with one of the covered ones back in time. My kind watched as this one was beaten by many, and then he was uncovered and nailed to some wood, and we saw him die. But a short time later, we saw him again, alive, but there was something very different about him. And it is said that through this one, love and peace has already begun to make its way back into the world. And we've been promised a day when all the creatures of all the earth will get along again, and there will be a renewed time without fear, and there will be no more death. Rat laughed.
Ha ha ha, you fool! The whole world was born in death. The whole world will continue to die in death. Violence and death are the way of things.
Just then a flash caught Raven's eye, and he dashed out of the way as bright yellow talons streaked past him and grabbed Rat by the head and the back. The falcon turned to Raven and said,
Why do you waste your time with such a fool? Your youth and good nature blind you. This lab rat only knows what he sees and hears in the lab. Outside the protected comfort of this lab, they soon die, because his kind will never make it out in the real world. He's given everything, and he doesn't have to produce anything but talk.
The falcon said sternly. I was hoping I could show him more of our world. Raven said softly.
I normally just chase birds, but these foul creatures are easy prey, because in time, they all think they're so smart, and they figure out how to escape to the roof. I've listened to many of them before I catch them, and I can tell you, he would not see, Raven, even if you took him gently in your talons and showed him all the beauty, the tragedy, and the workings of the entire world. He still would not see. By his own choice, he will always be limited to the box he has allowed himself to be confined in,
said the falcon.
Enough of this!
And he took off with Rat firmly in his grip. Raven sat for a moment and then took off after the falcon. He climbed high in the air and dove at the falcon with such fury the falcon released the rat and then turned to ward off the blow. Raven pulled up at the last moment and let the falcon return to his tree unharmed. Raven then flew down to the area where he had seen Rat fall. Rat had landed in a large dead tree, and to Raven's dismay, Rat was stuck in the middle. Many gnarly branches, spindly twigs, and sharp thorns held Rat so tight there was no way of escape. Oh, Rat, I am so sorry, for you are trapped and pinned beyond help, Raven said solemnly.
Oh, go away and leave me to die by myself, you stupid, foolish bird with your ridiculous story and false hopes of the future. As you can see, I am blind and confined to the utmost misery, all because I chose to waste my time with you. I had important work to do, Raven, and now all my important work is gone and for nothing.
Rat said defiantly. I just hoped to be able to share the real Raven started, but Rat screamed,
Leave me!
with everything he had, and Raven knew it was pointless to continue. Raven spread his wings, and the gentle breeze lifted him into the bright blue sky. For a long time, Raven mourned for the loss of the rat he tried to befriend. But what bothered him most was the fact that Rat died alone and with such a shallow view of life itself, one with no hope for the future. Raven swore to better acquaint himself with the history of his kind. He now saw the great importance of his being able to share his hope with others, so that they too could be comforted by knowing that one day all would live again in peace and harmony, even with the covered ones. This is not the end.